Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is our eighth lecture on Raymond Williams' modern tragedy. Out of this eight, two were given in unwritten form. In the first few lectures, you will find. Now, in chapter Order and Accident, this is the name of the chapter. In chapter Order and Accident, the author explains what kind of event makes a work of art truly tragic. If a work of art has wide-ranging response, it is tragic. This is the condition of Raymond Williams for a tragedy to be tragic or to be more heart-rending. That is, it must have a wide-ranging response. That is, it must have a wide-ranging effect. For example, in a work of art where the king or some such important figures quote death, it has wider response in comparison to an ordinary person. The reason is that death of a high-ranking person affects the entire nation. Ranking of a person is therefore an important criterion for tragedy. If an ordinary person meets his disaster, it is no doubt grief-striking, but not so tragic as in the case of a person of high social status. What kind of event is more tragic than others? Now he is going to discuss this point, that what kind of event is more tragic than others. The events such as mining disaster, an accident on the road, even war between two countries, etc., are not tragic in the real sense of the term. They are treated tragic. They are treated. They are treated as everyday experience. They are treated as everyday experience. There is nothing tragic in it. An event to be tragic must have some import, moral import. The spectator will thus be moved to live a life of virtue and shun vice. Now, here in this paragraph, he says another important thing, that the death of a person to be tragic must have something which moves the reader to a life of virtue and avoid or shun vice. With the passage of time, the old conception of tragedy underwent a change. Now, even the suffering of an ordinary person is as heart-rending as that of a person of high social status. With the expansion of education, the author says, the death of an ordinary person has also become very tragic and hard. To cite the example, Ibsen, you must have heard this name. To cite the example of Ibsen, whose plays are all about persons of middle or lower middle class society, nevertheless, they have all the prerequisites of tragedy. Our heart wells with sympathy when we find the characters in a state of distress and suffering. The alienation of high social status in tragedy became possible in the wake of expansion of education. Now even an ordinary person is as important as a person of high social status. The author says that earlier the tragedy or the death of a person of high social status used to move the reader, but with the expansion of education, the death of even an ordinary person has become as moving as that of a person of high social status. This has been possible only because of the rise, expansion of education. And finally, he says, explaining the subtitle of this chapter, Order and Accident, the author further highlights the significance of two terms, order and accidents. They depend on the culture and society. The significance of order and accidents varies in different social setups and organizations. What is orderly in one society may not be so in other social setup. Likewise, the term accident has different connotations in different cultures. Accident of various denominations may not be described as tragic. Likewise, what is orderly in one society may not be so in other social organizations. We have thus to be very cautious in describing an event as tragic or otherwise. Though with this, we come to the end of the first chapter.